Welcome to the CreekSide chat series. I'm so delighted to be here. Hello, everyone. My name is Jamila Walida Simon, and we're going to do a series. You got that right, which means that we're going to have multiple chats. But today, we're going to be here with two beautiful local activists. They're going to share with you a deep look into their lives. They're going to do a deep dive around their thoughts around some community issues. And we're just here to not just spread joy, but so that you get an intimate look at each of them in their lives. We're going to start out, and either of you can start and just share with me, what was it like growing up as a child and what brought you joy?
So, I'm Phoebe Brown, and I'm from Harlem, which is amazing because we both are, right? All of us are.
Yes.
Well, no, you're from.
I grew up in Queens.
Yeah. And what brought me the most joy was being able to go outside, play all the games that kids don't really play today. Hopscotch, scullies, jumping rope all day with a group of people who look like me, who we just had a good time. So we even started a club on my block of a few young girls who could get out the earliest in the morning, right? And so it was beautiful growing up in so for me, the joy was growing up in a community that looked like me, who is the kind of community that I try to implicate wherever I go, right? You know, we looked out for each other, we took care of each other, we settled our own, community disagreements. So that was joy for me. And you know what else was so always, it wasn't joy, it was a little sadness, watching those buses of white people traveling through, like looking at us as we're outside enjoying our lives. And they were tourists on the bus watching us. So that wasn't joyful, but it was fun when we licked our tongues at them.
Hi everyone, my name is Nicole LaFave. Like Miss Phoebe, I am from Harlem, and the joy that I felt is very similar to Phoebe, where it was a real community of Black and brown people. I went to school with people that looked like me, and I think the things that brought me joy was knowing that when an issue impacted one of us, it impacted all of us. And we came together and we talked about community solutions. So if one of us wasn't doing good in school, it was like a conversation among all the parents in terms of like, what were we going to do together to make sure that we were all succeeding and thriving. Another thing that brought me joy was riding the subways, taking the buses, walking down 125th Street, seeing business owners that owned businesses, and made me feel that I could also strive to own something as well. Thinking about what Ms. Phoebe said about pretty much gentrification and othering meaning folks looking into your life and consuming what benefited them. That was hard, and I think now as an adult I understand what it was, whereas when I was a child I was like, oh, these people think Harlem is cool. And now I go back and it's home, but the same people don't live there. There are now better resources that are not supporting people that look like me or people that were my classmates that can no longer afford to live there. So I have to ask the question, when Phoebe lived in Harlem in the 70s, in the 80s, and when I lived there in the 90s and early 2000s, why was there not an effort put into the community to make sure that we had supermarkets that were gonna sell food that was healthy for all of us, and healthy meaning culturally healthy, culturally responsive. So the joy I felt was knowing that most of us were struggling, but we still found the simple pleasures in being together and finding a way out, and not out in terms of like, out meaning we had an option. Like you could continue to live in Harlem if that's what you wanted, but you could move to Atlanta, you could move to Ithaca, you could move across the country if you wanted to, but there were options.
Awesome. It's so great to know each of you in real life, but also to get a sneak peek as to what you were thinking as kids.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to shift to the present moment. How did your preparation and planning meet this moment?
Mm-hmm.
We're in the midst of a global pandemic. We're in the midst of a city where we have a number of slots where folks can vote, but they usually run uncontested. So how did your preparation and planning meet this moment? Tell us a little bit about what some of the top issues are for you that you'd like to share with folks to think about as you get ready to campaign.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, one top one is for seniors. I really feel seniors is a voice that we don't hear much of. And now that I'm a senior, glamorous senior,
Yes.
There
but
you are.
I feel we leave their voices out a lot, and they should be our priority of keeping them safe, keeping them comfortable. They've given so much to our world that we owe them that. Housing is a big one for me because coming from Harlem, I now understand what those bus rides through Harlem were about. They were casing out housing for themselves. So gentrification don't just happen like last year. So that was over 50, 60 years ago, more than 60, that this gentrification plan was already in place. They had realized the boo-boo of moving to the suburbs, that it was inconvenient, and then seeing how convenient it was for us with transportation. Walking out your door, there's a bus. Walking out your door, there's a subway. So watching what's happening in this community with housing is very, very important. Defunding police and being accurate of what we mean. We mean to take the monies that has been going to police and putting them in grassroots organization. That's what my thoughts are. Grassroots, learning how we as a community can do what we seen happen in Harlem, where we took care of one another, right? Other things are making sure that LGBTQ plus are honored and respected, right? What else is real important for me is building a beloved community. Building a community that is really invested in themselves and loving, being transparent, intersecting meaning intersecting, not just saying it from your mouth, but beginning to intersect yourself with differences, right? So that's important. There's a whole lot of just being the voice for people who have a voice and who are talking. So that's the piece that I really want to be clear, that these communities are already talking.
Absolutely.
They're already talking, they're on the phone, they're taking care of one another, that you cannot be surviving if you don't have a voice. But my hope is for us to not just survive, to begin to thrive, right? And so working situations better for people of color, that they can work and get, and don't have to take jobs that are not honoring them, you know? So there's a lot more that I'm working, that comes to mind why I think now. And one last thing is, I grew up in a community where I watched progress happening, right? You know, the government didn't like it, but I lived in a community where 2 blocks down was the Black Panther Party, one of their offices. Around the corner was the Nation of Islam, which people don't see what I saw. I seen people who were at one time lost stand up. I mean, it was the most beautiful experience to watch the sisters and brothers go into the mosque in these beautiful colors. And also right downstairs was the Yoruba, where drumming was every night, you know. And as little people, we were sitting out there like this, you know. And yeah. Then we had something called a revitalization corps, which this guy said he was related to the Kennedys, which he did look like them, but you know, white people look alike.
Kayla,
So I was so what prepared me for the day is I was watching the civil rights movement in play, in reality, and on television. I was looking at people who looked like me, who was hosed, who was dog sicked on, and these were young people. These was generations of different, but these were people that looked like me. This sticks in my mind to this day. I feel just for that, I deserve post-traumatic stress disorder payments. So yeah, lots of those periods prepared me for today, right? Because, like we always say, if we don't know our history, we're doomed to repeat it. And so what I see happening now is a repeat. And that, as Black women, we have to be careful also, because we will become targets.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry if I went on too long.
No,
No,
never.
it's always great to hear what you have to say. I always love and respect what you share, and I always learn from you. So I would say my life has brought me to this moment, from being raised by a single mom who did not graduate from high school, who always saw education as a way to beat intergenerational poverty. So something that has always stuck with me has been, what about my friends? So when I think about my friends that grew up in Harlem who have taken different paths, I don't see myself being this extraordinary person. I see myself having had access to different resources, my mom having sought those resources out. So when I think about having a college degree and like what that really means, it was less about what I learned in those classes and more about the people I connected with and the different life experiences I learned about, as well as the history. So when we think about education and the lack thereof that our people, Black and brown people, were given, we're always hearing this comment of like, why can't they catch up? The civil rights moment. The civil rights movement happened. Why are they still struggling? And if you know our history, you will understand that the income disparity has a lot to do with redlining. White folks have equity because they have home ownership. So when we think about how many Black and brown people own homes in Tompkins County, we have to acknowledge that 75% of BIPOC communities are living under poverty. So they're not living within homes. They cannot catch up. They are not breaking even because they are not being let in or being brought to places that have resources. So I would say that what has brought me to this moment is sitting in spaces where I am able to see who's at the table, who is not at the table, why are they not at the table, and the people who are at the table, have they lived our life experiences? Do they know what it means to go to DSS and be treated like you're less than human, as if you can't read an application, as if you're not trying hard enough? I know so many people, men, women, trans folks, non-binary folks that are working hard every single day and just cannot catch a break. So I am here because I want to have a seat at the table to be able to bring that lived experience, because folks that tend to create policies don't necessarily live the everyday working class or poor low income person's life. So as we think about like No Child Left Behind, like who was sitting at that table and decided that, if students and kids are not doing well, let's give them less funds. Those folks probably, their kids did not go to public school, so they don't know that public school experience. As we think about SNAP, or when it was called welfare, that some folks weren't going to get welfare because they had to be out like volunteering. Where's the humanity and these policies, and who's looking out for people versus profit and capital? And I understand that we need revenue and we need capital to be able to build things, but where are we prioritizing people? Where are we saying capitalism inherently breeds inequality, and we have to pause and think about redistribution of resources? We have to think about bringing those folks who are struggling the most, prioritizing those folks first, and then everything else. It's a domino effect. And that is not to say that middle class and upper middle class folks don't have struggles, but there's a lot of privilege in that. So even when we're thinking about the renters, and we understand that landlords, they have taxes, they have things that they need to pay as well, but they also own property. and there is privilege in that. There are loans out there that will that banks and other credit unions will extend to them in circumstances, but for renters there is no privilege in that. So I would say what brings me to this moment is thinking about how am I setting my daughter and her friends up for success in 10 to 15 years? How is Miss Phoebe and folks that are in her community, how are we setting them up for success? When we think about a lot of Black and brown folks are retiring they're working till they're 70, 75, so they don't have 401ks. They cannot rent from they can't live in some of these homes for older folks because they can't afford it. So as we think about the older folks and what they need affordable. And when we say affordable, we really have to break that down and define what that means. We need housing that is low income housing, not just affordable. So my platforms would be starting off with a living wage. So as we think about housing and folks that are being exported out of Tompkins County and specifically out of Ithaca, we have to talk about their wages. How much money are they're making? And when I think about wages, I go back to a conversation I had with Brendan Wilbur at the Alternatives Federal Credit Union, where I was talking about my credit, wanting to buy a home, and he was like, okay, we can have this conversation about like what you can cut out of your budget, but what you need is more money. You need to make more money. It's not about cutting out that coffee that you buy at Gimme or that pastry. It's about the fact that you're making less than $27,000 a year, and you have 3 children, and you live in Fall Creek, and your rent is $1,400, and you don't get any type of assistance. You need more money. So a living wage is really important to me, and then we can talk about housing, and that being low income and moderate income, and thinking about mixed income properties.
Right.
I think that is important, where we're saying that yes, everyone is struggling in a different way, but we're also going to acknowledge the disparities and the folks that are struggling. We're going to prioritize the folks who are making $10 to $12 an hour, who don't necessarily have vacation pay. So when school shuts down for quarantine, folks are scrambling because they work at Aldi's, they work at Walmart, they work at Lowe's, they work at places that don't necessarily have compassion because capital is the thing that they're worried about. They're worried about profit. So I would say housing. I would say the next thing that is important to me is thinking about alternatives to incarceration and how we're setting folks up for success from reentry. So we know that some of our employers automatically don't look at folks if they have some type of history. When we think about our labor unions, that is a really important place where folks, I personally think, can get into hands-on work, because a lot of people that are in prison are doing manual labor and they're being exploited, so they're coming out with actual experience. So how are we working with labor unions when we know that the boomers are retiring and there is a need for that? So I think that there could be more coalition building between the needs and the folks that actually need support. So when people are coming out, how are we setting them up for success so they're not going back to things that actually got them into the issue? So when we're talking about folks living their best life, they need housing. They need to be making a living wage, and a living wage, again, is a very loaded term. So I think I have to break that down further in my platform. I think we also have to talk about business recovery. So I know a lot of us are always hearing, specifically in Ithaca, I'll make I statements. I'm hearing that, I need to support local businesses. I should go to the farmer's market and buy, local produce. Again, going back to wages and housing, can I go to the farmer's market and buy a $7 cabbage if I'm making $12 an hour? So while we want to support our local businesses, I think we have to be really intentional about what the needs are for all these different constituents, and how I think New York State just received $36 million. So what is Tompkins County thinking about in terms of building and creating sustainable employment opportunities, while also giving local business owners relief and support? So I would say that what has brought me to this moment is acknowledging that this pandemic did not just start last March. We had folks that were dealing with housing, folks that were not being paid enough, folks that didn't have adequate health care prior. So I would like a seat at the table, because I am always going to be honest and transparent and communicative, and the folks that tune in to the Board of Education meetings, I think will vouch that I'm always asking really critical, hard questions, even even when I know that the answer is an answer that the community will not be happy with.
Well, what I love about this conversation and this CreekSide chat is that we have a brand new table. So let's just acknowledge that, right?
Yeah.
We're inviting people to this new table. So we want you to continue to tune in. We want you to be here. We want you to ask the hard questions. There'll be plenty of opportunities to submit questions, to really be thinking deeply with each of us. But I want to turn a little bit and think about this, right? I love the balance that we find in community, especially with people who love on themselves. Can you tell me a little bit about what you do for self-care?
Jamila, I guess I'll start. I personally think self-care is so important. I will admit that I'm not great at it.
We're gonna work on it.
Yes, I think self-care, part of self-care is having a support system, and to have people in my life, for example, like Jamila, to ask me, what is the one thing that you're gonna do for you today? I will also say that sometimes it feels like self-care is a privilege. So when Phoebe and I are in our different spaces and we're fighting for change, sometimes it feels like we can't take a break. I don't necessarily feel like I can take a break because the needs are so high, the community voices are so loud that it feels sometimes selfish to take a break or to take a step back. But I am learning and leading into the fact that it's self-preservation, and that when I'm not my best self, my kids aren't getting the best me, the community's not getting the best me. So I would say self-care is finding a balance between the work that needs to be done and decentering myself. So even if I can't make it to the protest at Chestnut this past weekend because I was in quarantine, that doesn't mean that other people aren't going to show up. I don't always have to have a seat at the table. I should actually be creating space for other people to join the table so that they feel like they're included. So self-care is decentering yourself, taking a step back, refilling your love tank. And that is cheesy and corny, but to me it's really important that I fulfill my love tank and I know what's in my love tank, that potion. And some of that is watching garbage TV, some of that is like eating Funyuns with my son on the couch, watching crazy TV shows. Some of that is just dancing. And my close friends know that I love to ignore text messages and just like dance for hours in my house alone to Lizzo. So I think self-care is reminding yourself of like what you love, and making time for it. And I acknowledge that making time for it can be hard and it can be a privilege, but it's important.
So for me, self-care is making sure that my needs are met. When I say self-care, doing the work that I do is self-care for me. Because at the end of the day, I feel really good that I'm doing something to help someone else, be there for someone else, love upon someone. So for me, my self-care comes from caring for others, right? So, and when I'm feeling, when I'm beginning to feel overload, I remember my ancestors. I remember Harriet Tubman. If she took a break, all those slaves would still be enslaved, right? If that's what self-care, because we make it like self-care means let's take a break, let's move back, let's take a vacation, something we all can. But self-care for me is caring for others. That feels good for me, right? You know.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So while you're caring for others, when do you find time to care for yourself?
Well, that's the thing. I have others that care for me, that helps me, energize me, builds me, and so okay, I'm that lady. I'm gonna take care of me regardless. If it's time to get the nails done, they're getting done. If it's time to go get my braids in, get my hair done, I'm gonna take care of me. I'm gonna find time to take care of me. If I need a massage, I'm going to get it, right? I'm gonna do what I need to do to keep me energized, right? So yeah, I love to read. So a lot of times building my energy is just reading, finding books that I can sit sometimes all day and just read. In between, go check on my cabinet. So those are the kind of things that self-care for me. So when I have someone come to the door, I have gift cards for you. I have clothes to put out there. those are things I don't know. Those are self-care for me. You know what I mean? Those things make me feel full. And so I know when the break back up, right? I know when the energy is going low, right?
I think we've all seen, and I would say I think you're great at that, sending a nice, good email that says, I'm gonna take a break from y'all because y'all are doing the utmost,
right.
And we will send a loving email that says, take your time.
Right.
We will also check ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and think of the language and the things that we're putting out, and we'll come back to this. And I think that's another thing that is so important about community and working with people that know you and that love you and that trust your intentions, that they can also push back on you and say, I'm not feeling that energy right now, and I need to take care of myself, and I'll reemerge when I feel I have something to give this group.
Right, because they know, and y'all personally have seen me walk out on some
Yes, we have.
Right? So that's great.
Well, thank you for this light note. I mean, it's so great to be in community where we can be thinking about these issues, because there will be some hard times that emerge, and certainly in the middle of a global pandemic, that's not new to us, right?
Yeah.
We know what it looks like, but we also know what it looks like to be poured into, and we know what it looks like to be able to pour into others, and that's so important. So I want to do some heavy lifting with you right now, and just ask an open-ended question around, what do you think about this new policy around reimagining public service? What is that?
Public
safety, excuse me. What does that look like for you, and what are your thoughts on it?
Well, for me, I don't really care for the reimagining, right? For one, that sounds like a Disneyland title for a movie. Just pull that up. For me, reimagining is not enough. For one, I'm a firm believer of going to where.
Hello, please leave a message after the tone.
Sorry.
Okay.
So it's a real. So for me, first is understanding the root cause of the problem. I don't think that we have really yet talked about where policing comes from, why it never worked and will never ever work, right? It comes from capturing indigenous people. It comes from capturing slaves, and that was not a good look. It's doing today what it's been doing back then, So I love that we're in conversation in our communities about it, but I have not heard yet, coming from police, apologizing to Black and brown people of what they've watched other police do to us, right? So that would be a step for me, right? So what arises in me when I hear it is, have we even scratched the surface of what we want to see, right? This all came about because we are getting Black and brown people killed in this country for years, right? And we say George Floyd was like the tipping point, but no, it's been much longer than that. So for me, reimagining the police, first I think we need to really have deeper discussions before we just jump out there and do another Band-Aid, right? And so for me, I'm always hopeful and is going to be involved and share what I feel. So that for me right now is important. I'm glad the conversation is going. There's a lot more conversation that we need to have that I'm not hearing.
I would say I agree with what Phoebe said. I would also add, I feel very indifferent about the proposal, and I'm not sure if it strictly stems from the delivery of the proposal. in terms of finding out about it in a GQ magazine versus it coming from our mayor to the community. I think it's problematic when Common Council and Tompkins County Legislature is finding out about a proposal that will impact all of us through a GQ magazine versus hearing it from our mayor, who is constantly saying that he's invested in the community. So I will say that I feel as though the mayor shot himself in the foot by the delivery of this proposal, because most of us are now reading it with that lens. My eyes are like half open to it, just in terms of thinking about the intentions versus the impact. Diving into the proposal itself, going back to what Phoebe said about reimagining, when I think about reimagining public safety, that equals reimagining state sanctioned violence. I don't want to imagine police brutality. I do not want to reimagine the many painful videos that we've watched over the past year of people dying in the streets. I would rather us have a real honest conversation around what does it mean to be safe. I think we all have different definitions of safety. I think people in Fall Creek have their definition of safety. People that live in South Hill, people that live in the Bell Sherman area.
Karen's in the park, everybody.
Everyone has a different definition of safety. Black folks cannot drive in a car, in a nice car, or a car in general without being a suspect for something. I cannot walk into Target. Let me not throw shade at Target because I love Target. Target treats me well. I can't walk into, say, a TJ Maxx with a shopping bag without being seen as someone that's going to shoplift. So again, when we talk about safety, like what does that mean to each of us? So I think the city really, and the county, because they're both part of this proposal in ways, I think they both really need to define what they mean by safety when they say public safety. When we're talking about law enforcement, going back to what Phoebe said, I think it's really important for everyone that's watching this video to understand how the police as an organization was created. It was birthed from slave patrols. So once the Civil War ended, Reconstruction era happened, they took slave patrols and reformed, because we're talking about reform when we should be talking about revolution. We should be talking about something new. They reformed slave patrols into police. So police officers now continue to protect capital, protect property, and over police marginalized communities, whether that's Black and brown or rural communities. So I think that it's important for us to understand what the history of policing has been, and then talk about what do Black and brown people need to feel safe in these streets. What do I need when my going on 10-year-old son is in middle school and he wants to walk home from school? What do I need to feel safe that he can walk from Boynton to the north side without him walking past the wrong neighborhood or wrong house and being seen as a threat? So while I hear police officers and supporters of police officers talking about the safety of police carry 15 to 30 pounds of weights to keep them safe every day. So as regular residents, what do we need to feel safe? What do I need to feel safe? What does my son need to feel safe to walk to the common market and not get shot from buying a bag of Skittles? So again, I think that we need to have those real conversations, and then I can look at this proposal, this 19 proponent proposal, and say what in this proposal is actually getting at the roots and the root causes, as Ms. Phoebe said. Because right now I'm not seeing that. I see a community justice center. What does that mean? How does that interact with our criminal justice system? Because police officers are the gateway to prison, to jail. So how are we starting with the gatekeepers, the folks that actually introduce us to incarceration, and breaking that down? Then we can talk about a community justice center. Then we can talk about criminal justice systems and how prosecutors, defenders, judges look at us and decide if we deserve a second chance or not. But I think as we think about this proposal, we have to get down deep into how can Black and brown people show up at the table and actually feel that being part of a focus group is going to go anywhere, because so many of us are tired of talking because we don't have time. I don't have time to continue to talk when I'm thinking about the early death of my children and my neighbors. we need action. So I'm not sure what in this specific proposal is going to bring us to that action. I hear a lot about mental health services within this proposal, and that's great. But the only interactions, all of the interactions that our people and people in general have with law enforcement is not a mental service, mental illness issue. So when we think about, incidents that happened 2 years ago on the Commons, that was not a mental health issue. So what in that proposal would have prevented those outcomes? And I'm not sure when I look at each of those proposals individually or collectively, I get an answer to that question. So I would personally say that it's not enough, and I'm tired of starting somewhere. We need more than somewhere, because somewhere is not enough. Somewhere's not going to save us.
No.
And we are tired of waiting for that, and waiting always has meant never. So I'm hopeful that we'll have like real conversations where we're centering Black and brown and marginalized voices, and not bringing them to the table after things have already been created.
Yes.
So this draft has already been created. City Council, Tompkins County Legislature need to move fast because of Governor Cuomo's executive order. But now we're being brought in kind of sort of as an afterthought. And I know that these focus groups were sent out early on, but folks are tired of talking.
Yes.
Like, surveys don't really do anything. Whether we're thinking about this, whether we're thinking about surveys that happen at work, where's the connection to the outcomes? I haven't heard from Savante or Jason Molino. What are the expected outcomes of these proposals? When you put out proposals, you have to state what each of these proposals are, what each of these recommendations, what root cause are they answering or responding to, and what is the expected outcome for these targeted communities? So I would like to see more of that in the proposal.
And for me, to keep hearing about bringing mental health in when you also talking about another systemic issue. You're talking about the mental health system has not worked on how to engage with Black and brown people. It still have the same attitudes of a system that has not worked for Black and brown people. I always hear a lot about, y'all should go to counseling, y'all should go to wellness, y'all should do. Why go to the same people who are hurting you? I'm hurting. So anyway, yeah. You bringing in, I'm not hearing much about community organizations taking that place of helping communities stay safe, right?
Well, this CreekSide chat has been filling me with so much joy. Of course, I sit at the table with the rest of the kids, just listening in to both of you.
Yeah.
But I'm excited, and I want you to tell our viewers before we depart for today, how can local residents get involved in your campaign?
Well, for me, one is the petitioning is going on, so that might be one. Donating to the fund, the campaign fund. Just sending me lots and lots of love.
All right.
On Facebook.
Okay.
Facebook.
Yeah. Just even stopping by and having a conversation with me. I have chairs outside. We can mask up and just sitting and supporting me and letting me know what it is that I can be doing to help make this community a beloved community. Just send me a message and we can have a conversation right outside.
Beautiful.
Besides what Phoebe mentioned, I would add, I would add, I would ask folks that are watching to do a deep dig into like who they are, how they want to be part of change. So even if you are voting for me or Phoebe or thinking about it, or our proponent or opponents, think about our platforms, think about what your personal experience has been and how that impacts how you see this specific community and what the community needs are. I see Phoebe and I as both being people who genuinely care about people, and we want the people of our community to guide the work that we do. So we have to hear from you, and I'm willing to meet people where they are, not in a theoretical sense, but like wherever you are. I privileged in that I have a car, and I can come meet you. I will soon be setting up community virtual office hours, so look out for like some corny like video where I'm dancing and say, can we talk for a minute? I just want to hear from folks. Donations are great. I understand we're in a pandemic, so asking for money is sometimes hard, but every dollar helps.
Yeah.
So think about it.
Yeah. I just have to say, you know, a few years ago I ran against the mayor, did a write-in campaign, and what I didn't know at the time was how it works, right? So I just thought, let me jump out here, let me just, you know, I did it like in the last month and a half or so, right? With no campaign manager, no this, no that. And so what I've learned this time is that I have to be more engaged, right? I did get 11%, which is not bad for a write-in campaign.
Not bad.
Right, but what I did learn is that I need to be in community in order to win. Yeah.
Well, I love this conversation. As I shared, this will be first of many, and so I want to welcome you to the CreekSide Chat series.
Yes.
And we want to welcome you to the family. Please tune in. We're going to talk about the nitty gritty. We're going to create new tables. We're going to smash tables. We're going to send people to the kids' table. So tune in as much as you can. And as always, make sure that you find a way to find joy in the day. Make sure that you find ways to support each of these beautiful candidates, and tune in with us.